This is a Going Back, Remembering UGA interview with Curtis Beall, conducted by Fran on September 25, 2008 in the Ray Nicholson House, home of the University of Georgia Alumni Relations Program on the campus in Athens. Mr. Beall, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We're looking forward to hearing your remembrances of your time at the university and know that you've got some great stories to tell because you completed a book recently, and we'll talk about that later, about that time in your life when you were here at the university. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your early days growing up.
Well, I don't know how many students they've had to come through the University of Georgia, but they've never had one that enjoyed the college life any more than I did. I did not study as much as I should have, but I had a good time otherwise. I came to the University of Georgia in 1941. I had a brother that had attended the University of Georgia, came up here in 1936. And you know, you kind of follow in your brother's footsteps about college and things of that type. And in 1941, I recognized that the University of Georgia was kind of the stepping stone that a lot of the state politicians used to advance their political careers. So that's really what I had in mind when I came.
You're a politician. You wanted to go into politics.
I wanted to be a politician, but it got up here, and when I was elected to, in fact, I ran in 2 or 3 different campaigns, cheerleader, campus leader, that kind of thing. And there's always somebody wanting to pull you in a different direction from what you want to do, you know, if you want to do what's right. So I decided then I was not a politician, so I gave up the idea of approaching the state political arena. But I was here at a good time. It was the beginning of the war, just after the beginning of the war. And everyone was interested in making that contribution to the war effort at that time. And the university was just before being taken over by the Navy. And it was necessary for those of us who lived in dormitories, Candler Hall, Old College, Joe Brown, and Camp Wilkins, because Camp Wilkins was all right. The Navy didn't take over that, but they took over all the rest of the dormitories. And they took over a lot of the buildings where they conducted classes. And we had a man here in Athens that was laid on your representatives of the Georgia House of Representatives, C.O. Fat Baker. Weighed close to 400 pounds. Fat had started this co-ed up in what at that time was a pharmacy building. It's up there on main campus. And later on, he was making pretty good money. The university decided they needed the co-ed, so they took that from him. But when the Navy took over, Fat had acquired a good bit of real estate here in Athens. And he had out on Hill Street, he had one large 2-story building. It was just off, about 2 blocks off Prince Avenue. And C.O., he always was real active in campus politics. And he was in all the organizations, Blue Key, Gridiron, the other organizations on the campus. And he told us, about 20 hours, he said, if y'all will, want to, says, I put some bathrooms and we'll get some beds. He said, we won't have any eating facilities. And he said, I'll be your house mother. So we had a house mother that weighed a little over 400 pounds. And you will find so many of these pictures in the book that we're going to talk about later. So Fat ran for representative in Clark County. He was elected. They had to have a special chair made for him so he could sit in the chair. And later on, Fat ran for governor. Well, I knew Fat real well, and he had helped me get started some up here. So he was coming to Dublin to give a political speech at the courthouse. So naturally, I went over to hear Fat and talked to him. I invited him to come out and spend the night with me. and my wife, we had just constructed our first house. So the bedroom that Fat was in was right next to our bedroom. Well, realizing how much he weighed, I decided I better put some extra slats under that bed, which I did. But about 2 o'clock that morning, you know how you listen for the other shoe to drop? I heard the mattress hit the floor. And I went in to check to see if he's all right, and I was trying to get him up. I could not get him up, so I told him, I said, Fat, you just got to stay here tomorrow morning. I'll get some help. We'll get you up. So I did. I got some of my farm help and came up back. It was two of us. It took 3 of us to get him up. But he wasn't hurt or anything, and he didn't mind staying there till the next morning.
He was used to it.
Yeah, I reckon so. But anyway, that's one of the things that happened here at the university.
Tell me, what was your major while you were here?
I majored in agronomy. I was then, and still am, amazed at how you can plant a seed and get a tree. And I was just interested in how things grow. I know the scientific explanation, but I still don't understand the complete process of reproduction.
It's a miracle, isn't it?
It is. It sure is.
And what was your favorite class?
My favorite class was agronomy, of course. That was my major. And most of the classes are over in Connor Hall. And my major professor was Prof. Collins. He was from Hawkinsville, Georgia. A little small man, but he knew soils, and he was real interested in that type of thing. And he was, at that time, actually, we'd go out into the farm over there on Ag Hill, and he taught us so much from a practical standpoint. And I was fortunate enough when I completed my degree. I liked one course when I was at the University of Georgia getting my degree. I liked the course in bacteriology, which was taught by Professor Burkhart. And of course, it was a required course for me, and it was a hard course. A lot of people that took that course didn't make the grade. So I waited to the very last to try to get that course. And before I could get it, the Marine Corps ordered me to active duty at Duke University. And I came back then in 1947 after I'd served my tour of duty in the Marine Corps and took that one course and got my degree.
How'd you do in bacteriology in 1947 after you'd been away a while?
I came out and made a B.
That's great. That's great.
That B, as far as I was concerned, that B stood, that course is behind you.
Talk a little bit about your favorite or most memorable campus characters. I'm not sure characters is the right word there.
All right.
Some of the people that stand out to you.
We had some good people here. I remember Uncle Tom Reed. I used to see him in the mornings. He always wore a black suit with a black derby and a white shirt and a black bow tie, I believe it was. And you could almost set your watch by the time he walked under that arch and going on up into the North Campus over there. He was just so different from a lot of them up here. I remember him, and I think they later named one of these buildings up here.
Reed Hall?
Yeah, Reed. Another interesting character was Clegg, which I'm sure some of these athletes have told you a lot about Clegg. Clegg used to, because he was a water boy for the football teams when Coach Wally Butts and E.S. Whitworth were here. That was when Trippy and Sinkwich and Racehorse Davis and that crew was made up the football team. And Clegg, he always looked forward to the formal dances which they had down at Woodruff Hall. Now Woodruff Hall was a basketball court and all, and they didn't keep it, the floors and all as clean as they do now. And we'd have formal dances over, and those ladies would always complain about the bottom of their evening dresses getting so dirty. But Clegg, he'd be over in the men's restroom, and he'd be brushing off with a broom and holding his hand out at the same time. He was good at, he could do two things at one time, yeah. There was another one that kind of stands out in my memory. We had a custodian up at County Hall, His name was Dean Wills, and that's an academic dean. So Dean's favorite saying was that he got his diplomas. Now Tom Breed got his walking stick, and they came down to Athens, Georgia, and started the University of Georgia. But Will had one fault. He loved moonshine whiskey, and we had a couple of boys in Callahall. They were twins who lived up in the mountains, and apparently they had a good source where they could acquire moonshine whiskey, and they'd go home, they'd always bring Dean back a gallon or two of moonshine whiskey. And we'd always know because we wouldn't have any hot water to shave with or bathe. And Dean, he was quite unusual, but everybody loved Dean Wills.
Those are great. I think it was Coach McGill who said that Clegg Stark could throw a football 100 yards.
He can throw it the length of, right.
Sidearm.
That is correct.
It's amazing. So, where did you live then? Besides, you lived in Mr. Baker's place.
All right, I lived in Callahall while I was at the university until the Navy took over, and then we moved out to Buckingham Palace. That was the name of our place.
Palace.
Right.
Is it still there, Mr. Bale?
The building is there, but the palace is gone.
On Hill Street.
Right.
I'll have to go do a little reconnoitering over in that direction. Wait, were the girls on coordinate campus then?
They were, the freshman girls.
Tell us what you all thought about that. I guess that was just the way it was, but...
We thought that was a good place to go to naturally, since the freshman girls aren't there. My wife, I married an Athens girl, June Clark. June was a beauty queen here at the University of Georgia, and she lived at 139 Hall Street. And I was in one of the old buses here. At that time, the Athens was the one that ran the buses. It wasn't the college. And we were on that. I don't think they had but 2 buses, and the fare to ride from South Campus to North Campus, or vice versa, was 5 cents. And the city council raised it to 7 cents. And I think I've got a red and black where we went up to protest them raising it to 7 cents. And I think I've got a red and black that says FAIR, F-A-I-R, FAIR, F-A-R-E, in bold print. Harley Bowers was the editor of the Red and Black at that time, who was later the sports editor for the Macon Telegraph. Harley regrettably had cancer about 3 or 4 years ago and died. But anyway, it was one of those old buses, and we were coming down, I believe, Broad Street, right there where the arch is. And I saw this young lady coming across the street. On the opposite corner from the Varsity was a Greek restaurant called Pete Petsapo's. And she was coming across from that area over to the arch. And I saw her go into the administration building. And I couldn't get off the bus until it stopped, of course. And I went into the administration. I thought she was the prettiest woman I'd ever seen. So I went over in the administration building. You know all those steps they got over there. I was like a cat squirrel going around that place looking for that woman. I never did find her. And about 2 weeks later, I was at a dance out at Pound Auditorium at Coordinate Campus. And I spotted, her name was June Clark. I spotted June. She had on a purple dress, and I thought she looked prettier then than she did the first time I ever saw her. But I went in and broke on her. And along then, a girl wouldn't give you her telephone number, unless they knew a little bit more about you. But I wouldn't let anybody break for a while. I told her I was going to dance with her till she gave me a telephone number. So she finally gave it to me. And about 2 or 3 weeks after that, at that time I had been elected campus leader, we had a little commencement. And the non-fraternity people would have the lead out at little commencement, and the fraternity people would have the lead out at homecoming. So I invited June to be in the lead out with me, and I've got several pictures of it over there in that case over there. And we started going together pretty just, how you start off just being a good friend, and your friendship gets a little more complex, as you go along. So we off and on, it was one of those off and on affairs for a good little while. And then when I got my orders to go to Duke University, we didn't correspond occasionally, or I'd call her occasionally. But I came back to another dance here, and that friendship got a little bit more complex.
More friendly.
Right. And we discussed, marriage some. But going into the Marine Corps, I decided that, I just didn't want to take a chance on being shot up and this, that, and the other, and then coming back and pinning her down for life. So we decided we'd wait till I got back from the Marine Corps. I was there about 2.5 years. Then came back. I got home in March, and we were married in May. And she was quite a gal.
That's great. That's great.
Incidentally, she was featured by the Extension Service on numerous pamphlets that they had. They would write up pamphlets about tell farmers how to raise cotton, how to grow vegetables, and that kind of thing. And she was on the front of a lot of those pamphlets that they had scattered around.
She was a cover girl, huh?
She was.
That's great. Talk a little bit more. You mentioned Little Commencement. And we've had everybody we've talked to who was here in school at that time talk about homecoming and Little Commencement. Those were the two big social events of the year. Is that right? Tell us a little bit more about Little Commencement. What was it all about? It was
one of those occasions where you really looked forward to it because it was somewhat formal. Long then, one of the popular dances was the jitterbug, and a lot of the college students enjoyed that. I had enough trouble with the waltz, much less the jitterbug, and never did get into the jitterbug business. But it was real outstanding, and it rewarded those who assumed leadership positions here at the university. Now, at that time, Bobby Lipschutz was the president of the Interfraternity Council. And later on, Bobby would be the legal advisor to Jimmy Carter while he was president. And also in latter part of 42 and 43, the enrollment at the university had dropped just a little over 3,000 people. And they asked, I believe Professor Brooks, haven't they named a building here?
Brooks Hall Business School.
They asked he and Bobby and I to make a tour of the high schools and so forth around the state, which we did, and encouraging students to come to the University of Georgia. But the Little Commencement and Homecoming, they were just outstanding events which we all look forward to. And it gave I'm sure a lot of them felt like I did, it gave you an excuse to take your favorite friend, enjoy being with your favorite friend in a situation like that.
And I understand 3 or 4 parties during the weekend.
Oh, yeah, right.
Big bands, do you remember who you had?
We had a band from North Carolina for that particular occasion, and June and I selected the song Stardust for our late night program. But we had, on different occasions, Sammy Kaye, Danny Kaye, several of the important bands around the country came here at that time, and some of the songs was Don't Fence Me In, and Over the White Cliffs of Dover, and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, and I'll Never Smile Again.
All those songs that we think are from the war.
Yeah, and that was music. I'm afraid a lot of the kids this day just have to face, they just get noise, they don't get music, but that was music.
Oh, and it's a little different too, and though you talked about breaking on a girl.
Right.
And now I don't know that everybody sort of stands and listens, don't they?
Right.
So the girls were out on coordinate campus. How did you get around? How did you get out there?
You walked. We walked. At that time, I doubt there was very few of the students that had automobiles. In fact, there were so few automobiles over in Connor Hall. They had 2 parking spaces right at the front door.
Oh.
And usually you could get in there to park an automobile if you wanted to. But there was just, a car if you could buy one, of course you couldn't buy a car during the war. They were all making, you know, machines for combat and so forth. You could buy an automobile for $800. Gas was 11 cents a mile, but nobody had the money to buy the car nor the gas. Most of us were. We had sufficient food. We had sufficient, you know, things that were the necessities of life. But we didn't have the government at that time telling us if you don't make X number of dollars, you're under the poverty level. Mm-hmm. Everybody just recognized the fact that, you know, that many people were not in good financial conditions. And that, my brother, who I mentioned him a while ago, he was here, and I know my mother was working 2 jobs, and my father was working 2 jobs. And it was just as hard then financially to finance a college education as it is today. It just takes so much more money today than it did then.
Going back to your parking statement, I know these young folks on campus today would be shocked to hear that 2 parking places handle things up at Connor Hall, I'll tell you that. So, when you lived in Candler Hall, where did you eat?
They had a beanery, which was, you could buy food stamps. It was located between Candler Hall and the Victory Garden. And you could eat there, or right across from there on Lumpkin Street, there was a Mrs. Bickerstaff, who had a boarding house. A number of the students ate there. Several ate over at the Georgian Hotel, which was over the varsity and on the side of the varsity. And most of us we didn't eat a lot of breakfast. We
slept in a little bit.
Too lazy to get up and go get a breakfast, I reckon. But we'd step over to the varsity. It was just a skip and a hop from Candler Hall over, and we'd go into the varsity. And you'd order a TP and an orange squirt. Now that was a piece of toasted pound cake, and an orange juice to drink. So that's all you say, just give me a TP and an orange squirt, and that would be your breakfast generally. Then on Sunday night, I told you about the Greek restaurant, Pete Petsapo.
Right.
He had a lot of things like, I'm sure a lot of the students here today are not aware that back then we liked sardines and these big dill pickles and those kind of things, and we'd go on Sunday night and that was our Sunday night breakfast. If we were not in a Blue Key meeting. I was president of Blue Key here in 1942. In our meeting place, we had a Prof. Sechrist, who was our faculty advisor, and everybody liked him. I think he was head of the Baptist Training Union at that time too. But we'd usually meet there about once, twice on Sunday night, meet about twice a month, and we'd have our meetings there in the meal and so forth. But that's just part of the university life that I really enjoyed.
Being with faculty and
right, and students.
About student rules at the time, you know, life's changed. Do you remember?
Yeah.
The women, I know, because when I was in college in the late 60s, we were still signing in and out, and you had to be in at a certain time.
Talking about change, I had I'm a pastor. I'm a Baptist and a member of the Brewton Baptist Church, and I've always been active in the Baptist Church. And we lost our pastor, who was a good man. He's going back to seminary to complete his training. I spoke to the church about 2 Sundays ago. They asked me to tell them about changes. And it was real odd. I was trying to decide what I wanted to talk about. There was 2 things that I was thinking about. One was, if a man dies, shall he live again? And I had really started working on that topic. And I got a couple of little Bible books there that I read in the morning, every morning. And both of them dealt with change. I was debating whether to go with the if man dies, shall he live, or change. So I said, well, maybe that's a sign of me I need to talk about change, which I did. But at that time, the ladies, that was before silk hose, it was before transplanted organs, it was before electric typewriters, before computers. Along then, you know, we believed that you married first and then have children. And coming out of the closet meant coming out of a little room where you had your clothes stored. And dope, that was a lot of the people that go into a store and order, say, I want to get a dope, they referring to a Coca-Cola, an RC Cola, some kind of soft drink. And grass, that was something you grew on your lawn, you know, in the past.
Something you mowed, wasn't it?
Right. It's not the same grass that we have today. And things of those type. And incidentally, in that book, which we'll discuss later, there's a whole chapter on that. And I think you'll enjoy reading how much change had really been made.
You are right. Talk about, and this is going to sound like a frivolous question, what did men and women wear in college in the early 1940s?
Well, to give you a short answer, they wore more then than they do now. You know, long then they wore the skirt and the sweaters. I think they wore more sweaters. The modern sweater doesn't have enough cleavage to meet the fashion requirements today, you know. But and they wore saddle Oxfords. Mm-hmm. And my wife used to tell our daughter, says, honey, it's better to conceal than to reveal. But it's they were clothed, I'll put it that way.
Dean Tate, we mentioned Dean Tate earlier, and everybody we've talked to, Mr. Bell's had a Dean Tate story. Have you got a Dean Tate story or two?
Well, yeah, Dean Tate he was a fixture here at the University of Georgia. Everybody knew Dean Tate, and he knew just about everybody,
That's right.
too. He used to ride his bicycle around on the campus all the time. If you had a problem, you could talk to Dean Tate about it, and it wouldn't go any farther. And he discussed it in private with you. And he was just somebody you could really rely on to get some good advice from. When they got, I mentioned to you, I think that on one occasion, after Georgia won the Rose Bowl in they won the Rose. It was a 42 team, which had Trippy, Racehorse Davis, and Sinkwich in the backfield. And Sinkwich had broken his jaw, and he was taking his nourishment through a straw. And when they went out to the Rose Bowl, of course, the cheerleaders and the band and none, you know, anybody other than the football team that go to the university just apparently didn't have the money. And they hired a junior college band out there to represent the University of Georgia, and there were no cheerleaders there. I think there was about 90,000 people at that Rose Bowl game. And of course they had a lot of military personnel there. But Dean Tate, he was just most unusual. And he did a lot of good for a lot of people at this University of Georgia. And he, at the time that the year Georgia won the Rose Bowl, they were going to play Georgia Tech the week before they would decide on who goes to the Rose Bowl. Now, it was understood that Tech had a good record that year too. And Georgia went over to Auburn, and they traveled by train coach then. And we would all, being a cheerleader and a campus leader, we'd always try to get some of the students down to meet them. They'd come in at 1 or 2 o'clock, whenever, it didn't make any difference. And after, you'd have a pretty good representation down there until they came back from Auburn. I bet there weren't over a dozen students down there. So some of the Georgia students, we found out later, got some yellow paint, and they painted the columns up there on the Commerce Journalism building and on LeConte Hall and on the sidewalks. And they painted, they put the score of Tech 40, Georgia 25. Well, that kind of set the campus on fire. And as campus lead, I was automatically the chairman of the student faculty committee, so the administration asked us to investigate it and find out what happened. So we did, and we asked the Tech to set up a comparable committee over there. And we advanced a proposal that they try to encourage their students not to come to Georgia and paint, and we wouldn't go to Tech and paint. Well, it wasn't long before it was easy to see that Tech didn't come over here, some of these Georgia students did. And it really created a lot of interest among the students. And that was when the baseball field was there where the new building's going up there now, and the bridge wasn't there. And we got a pickup truck from over at Ag Hill, and we hauled cardboard boxes from McGill's. Now that was where most of the girls got all. If it came from McGill's, it was what you're supposed to have. That was the fashion. So we hauled cardboard boxes over to the baseball field for about a week. And we had one huge fire, and it was a week before the Georgia Tech game, and on Friday night before the Georgia Tech game. And I doubt it was those students at the University of Georgia that didn't attend that pep rally. Another thing, long then, the University of Georgia had the university, it was the football field. The fence wasn't too high. And in fact, that was when they would watch the football game from the trestle up on Memorial Hall. They just didn't have the money to pay to get a ticket, all right. But we had a friend to come in from South Georgia to attend one of the Georgia games. And I was being inducted into Agronomy, which is still active, and you've seen them wearing the dress code is overalls, boondockers, red bandanas, straw hats. And part of the initiation was at the Georgia Tech Georgia game to get a casket from Bernstein Funeral Home, and I think they're still in business out here on Atlanta Highway. And Mrs. Bernstein she was tight, but she would let us use a casket for this, what we were going to do. And they'd take that casket and they'd put it on the shoulders, and these usually was 6 to 8 being initiated, and walk around the stadium with it. Well, we had this friend that slipped in, they caught him and they put him back out. So we told him to go over to the gum trees right across from where Uga's cemetery is. And we put him in that casket and walked him through the gate, and he saw the game and they never did know anything about it.
Oh.
Another thing we did that you see I was doing something, so I studied when I was up here. They had Lake Croton over there at that time, where the vet school is now. A good many boys from out of Camp Wilkins and some of us in Candler Hall. We'd get a seine occasionally and go down and seine that thing and get us some fish and go out in the country and cook them someplace in the woods. But it was just something like that was going on all the time. You just didn't want to miss out on those important things.
You mentioned several of the organizations that you were a member of, and in fact, president of several, Gridiron and Blue Key, I understand. Talk a little bit about, you were in Demosthenian also. Talk a little bit about Demosthenian and Phi Kappa and the relationship there. And it was somewhat a political relationship, was it not?
It was somewhat political, but of course I wasn't a member of Phi Kappa, I remember the Demosthenian. And it helped you get accustomed to speaking in the public. You get up and have debates, regardless of. I remember one subject. Should we have entered World War II? Things of that type were of current interest at that particular time. I was a member of Demosthenian. I was a member of X Club. That club disappeared. And incidentally, I have a sweater. You'll see a picture of it in that. And it's my understanding that it's the only one in existence. And I'm going to contribute that along with a lot of other items to the archives at the appropriate time. I'm in no hurry to do it, but I'm going to do it.
We're not in any hurry for that to happen.
Right. I was president of Blue Key. I was secretary treasurer of Gridiron. Bill Godwin, who was a football player, was president of Gridiron at that time. There was another organization that I don't hear much from now. It's ODK.
Well, there's a ODK chapter.
And that was the last step you'd make onto a Sphinx. And of course, I was ordered active duty, and I think I've been informed that I would have been as elected as Sphinx, but the Marine Corps was more important at that time, serving my country.
Talk about being a cheerleader.
Well, the cheerleaders were elected by the student body, and they would elect one non-fraternity boy and one fraternity boy, and they'd elect one non-sorority girl and one sorority girl. So it was just 4 elected each year, and then that would give them staggered terms. After observing the trials these present cheerleaders go through, I couldn't make it now, I don't think. But one thing that puzzles me a little, along then, tumbling was one of our most active activities. But they won't allow them to tumble anymore. And they, maybe they're afraid they'd hurt themselves or something. But I have attempted without success to locate some records that were made while I was a cheerleader here. Hugh Hodson, who was head of the music department at that time, he asked 4 of us to go over to Atlanta. At that time, WSB was on the top deck of the Henry Grady Hotel. And he asked 4 of us to go in, and he wanted to record some of the Georgia yells and some of the songs, like going back to Athens Town. Right. We went over there, and going up in the elevator got stuck. Now, I don't know if Mr. Hodson, if he had claustrophobia, what it was, but he was kind of like a cat in that thing. He was going to go out through the trap door in that thing, and we kept telling him, don't do that, you know. But anyway, before he could get out, they got the elevator going. And we went on up and recorded the songs and the yells. And it was, at that time, there was 4 of us he took. Jimmy Turner, who was later with the Georgia Forest Commission, he's deceased. And Ann Finley. Ann's mother and father had a cleaning business here. She's deceased. And Catherine Rice. I understand she is still in life, but in very bad shape. Mm-hmm. And I was included in the 4 to go over there. But I've never been able to find a recording of those songs.
You've never heard what you all sounded like, huh?
No.
Well, interestingly enough, we used "Going Back" as our theme song for our interview. So, long-time connection.
We don't ever do that anymore. I've been talking to Shelley. I think we're going to have to break the ice some way. So, you know, the cheerleaders come over to the continuing ed building every day about lunchtime. That's where we tailgate over there, and I tailgate with the cheerleaders. And I think when the cheerleaders get through with them sometime, we need to get up there and inform some of these students now about that song about going back to Athens Town, because that's a very appropriate song for the Georgia Yell and for the
it talks about
Bale,
the Chapel Bell and the Georgia Yell. Yeah, right. Yeah. I think sometimes you do have to sort of regenerate your traditions.
Right.
You mentioned your book, Mr. Bale. Tell us the name of your book and tell us a little bit about your book.
The name of this book is Memoirs of a Marine Dog, From the Rose Bowl to the Pacific. There was a lot about the history of the University of Georgia that's never been put in print. To me, that's a part of history. And in 1942, you could put on your cheerleading outfit, and you could catch a ride. You wouldn't have any problem with that. And we had to get to out-of-town ball games the best we could. We were expected to lead cheers at the out-of-town game, but we had to get there ourselves. And that was when the bus station was up here on Broad Street. So I stepped over there I had on my cheerleading outfit, and went over to the bus station. And I was fixing to buy a ticket. I think the ticket at that time cost about $2.10 to go from here to Atlanta. Well, I said, well, I'll just see if I can't save that $2. So I stepped out on the street, thumbed, and the nicest man came by and picked. I hadn't even got settled good before he picked me up. That was when you went into Atlanta by Stone Mountain, and that area right in there. And I noticed during the conversations that we talk about Georgia, but we never would talk about Tate. He just turned it to some other subject. Well, he took me down North Avenue, across from where the varsity is over there, and he said, "This is as close as I'm going to Grant Field." Well, I had to run all the fraternity houses and dormitories and all along that North Avenue. Well, those tech students spotted me by the time I got out of that car. And I think that's the longest 2 blocks I ever walked in.
Had to run the gauntlet.
Yeah, I sure did. And I decided then if I ever got in shape, I was going to try to help be a cheerleader to get to the field where they wouldn't have a problem like that. And that was where the seed was planted really for this book. And then too, it's there's so many things that had not been recorded, and I thought it ought to be the history of the university, so I put it in there, and it's in there, in that book.
What's your favorite story?
Well, I would assume the favorite story would be about my wife and I. I lost her in February, but there's so many things, so many stories. I remember one story. There was 3 of us in this one room up at County Hall. We stayed on the top deck in the corner room, directly across from a fraternity house over there. And we would, about 2 weeks before the Thanksgiving, Coach Butts and S. Whitworth would let us use the football uniforms except for the shoes. And County Hall would play Old College. And the ticket to get in was bring some kind of canned goods, some type of And these 2 boys, these 2 twins that had such a ready source of moonshine whiskey, would go up in the mountains. They'd bring back 2 or 3 gallons of that moonshine whiskey, and we put it in a copper pot. You can't put that type whiskey in galvanized. But anyway, anybody that wanted it could go there and get, if they wanted a drink of whiskey, they got it. But they had to have that canned good. And then on Thanksgiving, we would distribute that to the needy around Athens here. There's just any number of stories that
they let you play on the stadium field.
Yeah. We just put on the regular football uniforms, but we'd have to wear tennis shoes.
Did everybody come out all in one piece?
Yeah. Well, we didn't. We weren't gonna hurt each other. We were all country boys. We were tough anyway.
Let's go back, and I know you were here 41, 42, 43, and then got called up, right? I
was ordered active duty on July 1, 1943.
When we talk about the way the rest of the world affects campus, sometimes we look at campus as sometimes we almost lose sight of what else is going on around the world, but that was, the Second World War was something that could not be ignored. Talk a little bit about how that affected. You mentioned the Navy coming in and all. As a student, were you waiting for the draft, or were you just trying to make your plans? What?
Most of us, if you were a junior or a senior, most of the different services, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, Air Force and all, they had various type programs you could enlist in, because they didn't have the adequate facilities for training most of the officer candidates, which most of us want to get into an officer candidate school. I'll give you my particular situation. I joined the V-12 program. That was the Marine Corps program. And I went down to Macon, Georgia, and I volunteered in 1942. They let me stay in school then until July the 1st of 43. So I was going summer and winter trying to get my degree, and I got within one course, but I had to come back and get that course, which I referred to previously. students were more interested in, I think, in world affairs at that time than they are now, because the Japs had made that sneak attack on Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And I remember on one occasion that Dean Tate and some of the other administration, they set up they wanted to have a war bond rally over here. So they set up a temporary stage up there by the chapel. And they asked me to be the speaker, which I did. And I've got a copy of the talk that I made over in that briefcase. And it was to encourage the students, to put forth their best efforts since they had the opportunity to be in college, take advantage of it. Because it was just a matter of time before they were going to be in the service. Mm-hmm. The newspapers all talking, this is going to be the war, just like World War I, this is going to be the war that ended all wars. Right. And at the time, the Japanese had been quite successful in running roughshod over the American forces and the British forces and Australian forces and so forth. And Roosevelt, he had a knack for feeling the pulse of the public. So he called in the Chief of the Army, General Marshall, and he called in Nimitz, who was the head of the Navy. And he told them he wanted to bomb Japan. They said it can't be done. We don't have any planes that are big enough to bomb Japan. He said, well, I want it done anyway. So he was very insistent. So they came up with a plan to take B-25 bombers and teach them to take off on a short space. And they trained on the carrier Hornet to land and so forth. So they got it all set up, and this carrier they were going to go within 500 miles of Japan and bomb Japan. He thought this would be a real uplift to the American morale, which it was. And I believe he was sure that everybody's interested in where the bombers came from. He said it was Shangri-La, I believe is what he told them. Nobody knew what that was. So the carrier was approaching Japan proper, and about 400 miles before they reached that point that they were going to take off from, 2 picket boats of the Japanese spotted this carrier coming in, and of course they notified the Japanese headquarters in Japan. They managed to sink one of the picket boats, the carrier Hornet did, but the other one they missed it. So they decided, even though the weather had turned bad and the waves were real high, most of them made up their mind that they wanted a suicide mission. But they took off and they bombed Japan, and most of them were supposed to land in an area of China. Most of them ditched in the ocean. Very few of them managed to get to their destination, which was in China. But one crew managed to get there, and the Japanese found out that they had landed, and they began to search for them. And it's reliably reported in some of the information I have that the Chinese kept moving the American crews around so the Japanese couldn't find them. They were trying to get them back to Burma so they could get them back to the States. And it's reported that they killed 250,000 Chinese trying to find those troops. They didn't value human life very much. And we were in, my tour of duty in the Marine Corps includes the battle down Okinawa, which was one of the bloodiest wars we had in the Pacific. In fact, the number of troops killed, Marines and Army, on Okinawa was twice as many as were killed on Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal combined. But the 1st Marine Division, which I was a member of, they met the Japanese on Guadalcanal, and that's where they turned them around and started them back to Japan. And from there, it was Tarawa, Peleliu, several battles there. And at the end of the campaign on Okinawa, we just knew we were going to come back to the States, since the 1st Marine Division was the first division to be in combat out there. Well, lo and behold, we found out we were going to go to China, and repatriate the Japanese soldiers back to Japan. So we went we went up north, on the northern part of the island. The island of Okinawa was shaped somewhat like a pork chop. And the goal there was to cut that island in two when they invaded on Easter Sunday, April the 1st. And there was 2 Marine divisions and 2 Army divisions. It didn't take long to go through and cut the island in two, because the Japanese had changed their tactics. They had been attacking the forces, the amphibian forces, when they were trying to land on the beach. Well, they changed here. They let them come ashore, and they were going to try to kill as many as they could of the troops, so they wouldn't have enough to invade Japan proper. Okay, so it didn't take just a little while to go through and cut the island in two, and the Marines went north and the Army went south. Well, the Japanese had chosen, there was a few troops in the north that we had to clean out, but not many. And the Army came south, and it was just a matter of time before they got in there. It's a beautiful island. And the Japanese had really fixed this for defense, and there's a lot of caves, and the terrain favored the defenders considerably. So we went on. It wasn't long before the Army had to have some help, so we went south, and we were involved there. And one of the roughest parts of the whole campaign, as far as I was concerned, they had a line, they call it the Naha Shirikawa Digosenki Ridge line. It was a line that all the way across that island. And this Shirikawa was the Japanese West Point, even though it wasn't in Japan. That's where they trained a lot of the officers. And that thing, you can't imagine how they had caved out. They had hospitals, they had communication systems. They just had a complete array of areas in there to
built into the ridge
built
line?
in the ground, yeah. And that was a pretty tough nut to crack. In fact, I had an 81 millimeter mortar platoon, and I was on our OP, which the observation point to observe the fire. I had to direct the fire of the mortars who were behind me. And from my place that I was located, I could watch I believe it was a Battleship Mississippi, throw 16-inch shells in there against that. They had a huge wall around that thing. Must have been 10 or 12 inches, 10 or 12 feet thick. And some of those 16-inch shells would ricochet off of that thing. It was so well built. But finally, we did conquer that island, and we went on south. And I'm sure you probably read where the Japanese would and the Okinawans, the Japanese had brainwashed them to the extent that the mothers would get their children and get on those high bluffs there along the China Sea, and they just jump off to their death. Few of them didn't do that, and we conquered those. We set up a defensive line all the way across the island to catch the strikers coming back through. And you had to be real careful. They would hide hand grenades under the arm, under the crotch, and they'd mix in with the Okinawans. The Okinawans were humble people, and they suffered tremendously on this as a result of the combat there on that island. I remember I had one man in my platoon, a fellow named Fredo Miller. Fredo was from the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. He had a red handlebar mustache. That thing stuck well, yeah. But he was the best at acquiring. In the Marine Corps, you don't call it stealing; you call it moonlight requisition. he was the best at going out and getting jeeps, and of course we were about to starve to death. It got to raining. We were there kind of in the monsoon season, and what C and K ration we had was just all mixed with the water. It's kind of like I don't know, you take meal or flour and put water in it. That's about what it was. But anyway, they raised sugar cane and sweet potatoes. Well, as a boy, I had grown up in the country, and I used to raise some of the same thing. So it was real odd. I had a group of men in my platoon from the northern states, and they had never chewed sugar cane, and they didn't know what a sweet potato vine was. So Fredo had moonlight requisitioned a tent, and he gave it to me, and I set it up behind a big hill there. Big mountain, actually is what it was, where the Japs had a hospital. And I got out, and of course you sleep in the mud. If you can find a board, you sleep on the board, and things of that type. So I decided I'd get me some of those potato drawers, and I made me a bed. And after things had quieted down, and we'd caught most of the Japanese coming back through, I decided I'd take me a nap one day about lunch. So I lay down on those potato vine drawers, and I went to sleep. Now my brother, we had not seen each other 2.5 years, but we had arranged a code by the name of songs through my mother. And I knew he was on Okinawa, and he knew I was on Okinawa. But anyway, I was asleep now that day, and he was down on the coast. He was in charge of an amphibian tractor battalion, and they were always bivouacked on the coast. So somebody woke me up, and he looked at me, and the first thing he said, "You're the dirtiest thing I've ever seen in my life." And of course, you couldn't, if you bathed, you had to bathe in an old bomb crater. The soil was clay soil, and you just as dirty when you got out as you were when you got in. So he told me if I'd come down to where they were located, bivouac, he'd take me out in the China Sea. He said he'd take me out far enough where I wouldn't muddy up all the coastline. And in later years, when we got back here in our supper club, he'd tell that story, and he'd tell them that I was so dirty that I muddied half the China Sea when he got all that mud off of it.
Talk to us a little bit about what you did later in your life. What happened after you got home?
Well, I got home in March of 1946, and of course my primary interest at that time was getting married. Mm-hmm. And we hadn't seen each other 2.5 years. And I came in fact, you were ordered inactive duty based on your point system. If you had a Purple Heart, you got so many points, or each month you were in the service, you got so many points, and they were discharging men by the number of points they had. Well, I had hepatitis when I was in China, and they advised me that I had enough points that I could come back to the States. The treatment, incidentally, for hepatitis at that time was hard candy and grapefruit juice. That was our treatment.
Interesting.
And it killed several. Several of them they put aboard hospital ships, and some of them they had to send back to the States. Well, I was very fortunate. I soon got to where I could get around pretty good. And they ordered me to Tangkou, China, which was a port of embarkation. And I had about 300 Marines, and I was the commanding officer on board. In fact, the only other officer on there was a Catholic chaplain. So when we started out, we were on an APA, and for 18 days we didn't see any land. We were coming to the States. And I told those fellas, those Marines, I said, "Now I tell you what I'll do." I said, "We've all been through a lot." I said, "You don't give me any trouble, and I won't give you any trouble." And that was the most well-behaved group of Marines I think I ever saw. We came under the Golden Gate, and of course I was wanting to get a good night's sleep. So I went up to the St. Francis Hotel, and I got me a room, and I slept. And the next day I I was traveling under orders, so I went down to LA and caught a plane there. And the planes at that time, they didn't care, they weren't as big as they are now by a long shot, and they carried about 30 people. So we were going to have to land at Dallas-Fort Worth from LA. And coming over the Grand Canyon, we got into an electrical storm. And that plane was just like a cork on the water. And it, I thought to myself, yeah, I am going home to get married and been through a war, and now I'm going to get in a plane crash here. I've never seen as pretty colors in my life. When that lightning would flash, you would see different colors reflecting off the rocks. But anyway, we made it to Dallas-Fort Worth. The weather had soaked in, so they took us. We landed at Dallas, I think it was, and they took us over to Fort Worth, which is about 40 miles, and then we came on to Atlanta. Well, my wife, June, she and 5 of her classmates here at the University were in Atlanta. They were teaching in a kindergarten. Most of them majored in child development. Well, she met me at the airport at about 2 o'clock one morning, and she had 2 of her friends with her. Well, we got it. She lived over there on Peachtree. They had a place they were renting. And she met me at the airport, and I think I say in that book that that's the longest kiss I think I ever had. I don't think we came up for air from the time we left the airport till we got to her apartment there. And we went in that night, and all the girls, there was 2 bedrooms, and there was 3 in one and 3 in the other. So all of them had gone into one room, and they were going to give me that other room. Well, I needed to take a bath. I hadn't had a bath in a little while. So they all went to the teaching the kindergarten next morning, and I went into the bathroom to take a bath. And I've never seen as many bras and panties. Now you can imagine coming out of that mud and all that stuff in combat, and coming to a scene like that is just such a contrast. So I decided, you know, I might hang myself on some of these bras and think, I better take me a spit bath or so. So I did. And we went from there. From there on, we were married here in Athens, and Dr. Wilkinson married us at the First Baptist Church. And I came back, and we lived with her mother and daddy until I could take that one course. Then I lived in a little small town called Bruton. And we built us a house. In fact, I was employed by the Department of Education as a veterans agriculture teacher. So I had accumulated a little leave time, so I took off 30 days, and from the day I took off, we started the foundation on our house. And at the end of the 30 days, we were ready to move in.
Goodness gracious.
Long then, you could just get all the help you wanted, really. June was always really interested in, she's a very religious person. And we had a group of young kids in that little small town. And I had been offered a job by civil service in Boca Raton, Florida. Offer was pretty good. We thought about taking it for a while. But there was that group of kids there, we decided we could help them some. So we decided we'd stay where we were, and my folks already lived there. And I had told my father that when he'd make us get out, we had to pick cotton to buy our school clothes. And he worked pretty hard on the farm, so I had told him when I left, don't count on me coming back, because I won't ever be a farmer. My brother told him the same thing. Well, both of us came back, both of us got into farming business. So I learned then, don't ever say you're not going to do something, because that's what you're going to do. But anyway, we acquired some real estate, and we were real active in the church. And I taught an intermediate Sunday school class there for about 25 years. And she was real active as director of the Bible school and training union and those type of things. But anyway, we felt like we were helping those kids. And incidentally, out of that, there was about 10 in there. 4 pastors came out of that group, and another lady who is really she's a pianist for the church, and a Sunday school teacher, and one of the real leaders. But it's real odd. While we were in the service, the ladies had to kind of take over, and they did a good job. And they fixed a flag, and the symbol V for victory, which Churchill started. Each time there was one of those members of that church that was going to service, they'd take a star, a gold star, and they'd put it on that flag, and they were putting it in the form of a V. Out of that little church, there were 17 people men that went into the service. And there was 2 of those men that were with Merrill's Marauders in Burma. There was 1 or 2 that were on the Bataan Death March. There was 1 that was a navigator on the plane where they raided the oil fields in Poland. At that time, they were sending about 1,000 planes over at the time. 34 of those planes were shot down. And my brother and I were in the Pacific, and it's just, you know, we were in some real combat in World War II. Of those 17 men, every single one of them came back. And most of them in pretty good health.
That's great.
And something happened here about 3 or 4 years ago that I thought was a little unusual. One of my best friends there in that group was a boy named Doug N. Moy. His daddy was a country doctor. And in World War II, of course, we scattered all over the country. He went to Panama. Later on, he came back, and he was an executive with Gulf Oil Company in Tennessee. Big Tennessee fan. So we was one of those relationships where you talk to each other by phone or maybe visit each other once a year or something like that. So I believe 3 years ago, when we played Tennessee here, he didn't know I was coming to the game, and I didn't know he was coming to the game. And he came in, and I was 92,300 and something, whatever that stadium. He came in and sat in the seat directly in front of me.
You are kidding.
And so, you know, things happen real hard sometimes.
They are miracles, I think. They are miracles. Well, we have certainly enjoyed having this time with you today and letting you share your memories with us.